got a question about world class breaking away from the NWA, and Dad was against it. From what I remember, one of Dad's major things against breaking away was that we wouldn't have the world's champion coming into the territory.
Exactly.
Which at the time was Ric Flair.
Woo! Yes.
I didn't know if it was like Flair or Dusty who was the champion when the succession, but Flair at the time.
Dusty got it back a few months later.
Right. But, Flair at the time was
the man.
He was looked at as the world's, he thought of the world's champion. It was Flair. Yeah. So anyways, Dad, that was one of his big beefs with not wanting to break away from the NWA because then you lost Flair coming in here. So the question was, can we talk more in detail about the NWA or world class breaking away from the NWA? So,
well, the official split was announced. I want to say it was shortly after Gino died, February, March '86. But that
didn't have anything to do with it, right?
No, right. That was just everything happening at once. You know, Lance Von Erich coming in, Gino dying, the pulling out of the NWA. Just we did a lot. There's a lot of self-inflicted wounds on our part. But as far as that, the problem started mainly because Fritz Von Erich, Fritz, and Jim Crockett, they never really liked each other really much at all.
Why?
Well, Jim had an opinion of Fritz that was not good, and Fritz's opinion of Jim was also not good. And also at the root of it too was they realized that Fritz realized that Kerry was not going to get another run with the title. That had a lot to do with it. And it was also becoming hard from a booking standpoint as to try to come in and bring Ricky in here and have him lose without the title switching. And also, there was just tension between, at that point in time, 85, 86, the NWA was down to, us. Eddie Graham had just passed away. So Florida was on its last legs, and Jimmy Crockett. So, and Bill Watts was never really a part of the NWA, though he would use the champion. So it was a shell of itself.
So would you say the reason why Fritz pulled out was because him and Crockett didn't get along and something to do with Kerry
not getting another run with the belt, which he legitimately should have got one. The run that he got initially should have been a lot longer than what it actually was. And Dad was also against that from another perspective, because when everyone saw, and I know Hulk Hogan was over, but among people in Dallas, they saw the world champion as whoever held the NWA world title. And at that point, the guy who had that title for the better part of the last 5 years had been Ricky Flair.
Right, but let's make no mistake, Hulkamania was running wild.
Yeah, absolutely. It still is to this day. But as far as that went, everyone here in Texas, they viewed whoever held the NWA world title as the real world champion. That had been Ricky Flair. Yeah, and now you have, I loved Rick Rude, but fortunately someone was smart enough, Fritz, to put the title on him, and then Chris Adams and Black Bart and Al Perez. But that title here was never taken as seriously because it wasn't the NWA world title. And there were some also misgivings with there was like a few half shoots done as far as promos that were done by certain guys, this and that, and then saying that Lance Von Erich destroyed Ricky in a match. It just a lot of things. Not having Rick here hurt, and pulling out of the NWA hurt. And Dad was also against it because a lot of times you would have to have them send you guys to come in. That really cut off who you could bring in.
Do you so I don't if they would have stayed in the NWA, what would have happened? Because it all just kind of dissolved anyways. So if they would have stayed in, what was it, another 2 years, and then the Jarretts bought it, or
the thing is, this is where it got complicated, because wrestling was never supposed to be what it is now. It was never supposed to be on a national level. As far as one TV, because the territories you bring a guy in for 18 months and he goes somewhere else and he come back in and he go back out. Because nowadays, if everyone's on TV, after 18 months, you're sick of looking at the guy. But the main thrust, what hurt us here was Ricky Flair was no longer coming in. I remember as a kid, I was like, okay, we succeeded from the NWA. I knew it meant Flair wasn't coming in anymore. And to me, as a 7, 8 year old kid, that was
always a cool thing looking back. Even now, looking back at World Class in the early and the mid '80s, as hot as everything was with the Von Erichs and Chris Adams and the Freebirds, but when Flair came into town, that made it like that was like even more than icing on the cake. It was like that was really special. That was really cool
because you could have Kerry work with Moon, one man gang, and that match meant something. And then him and Kev could go work with Chris and Gino, and that meant something. And then when Ricky would come in, he'd go throw with him for 45 minutes, and it was equally over. But I had asked Dad right when that had happened, because Dad had just left to go work for Fred Barron, not because of the succession from the NWA, but because of problems with Ken Mantell. This all happened around the same time. And I remember saying, did you say anything? Dad was like, well, he knows how I feel about it. Dad was totally against us leaving the NWA. And then, because Dad had been Fritz's matchmaker for the longest time, and even when he wasn't the matchmaker, he pretty much did what he wanted. And he had a very, very affable relationship with Jim Crockett, too, because he was a booker there, too. Dad's relationship with Jimmy Crockett was more of a buddy-buddy type relationship. His relationship with Fritz was way different. His relationship with Fritz is, if any of you have seen the classic Magnum PI show, it was sort of like the relationship that Magnum had with Higgins. They weren't always simpatico. They didn't always get along, but there was a mutual respect there, I think. So it was a little bit different. I asked Dad, I said, did you say anything? And Dad goes, no. And then years later, I asked Dad, I said, did you ever think about saying something to Jimmy or saying something to Fritz and try to be like an olive branch? Dad went, no. So why? It wouldn't have been any good. It wouldn't have worked.
I would say, this is just my thought, like, I don't think it really, I think you lost a few houses, throughout 86 and 87, and that you could have got with Flair coming in several times a year. But, other than that, everything was dissolving anyway. So, right?
The biggest difference was, though, at that time, that's when 86, summer of 86 is when the opposition started. They were, after years of being, part of what we would, were aligned with, they started coming in here.
Who's they?
Jimmy Crockett.
Oh.
Because we were running the Mesquite Rodeo Arena. He was running Reunion Arena. And I just remember Rick Rude in the dressing room of the Mesquite Rodeo Arena saying, hey, why don't we go over there and catch the second half of Crockett show? Why? Is somebody going over there trying to get a job? Which Dad eventually helped Rick get a job. His dad was acting as Harriet Tubman in the Underground Railroad, getting guys that were over here, over there. But if we would have had, then we also could have, like when Kerry got hurt, we could have brought the Rock and Roll Express in here.
Why are we whispering?
We could have brought Magnum in here. We could have brought Barry Windham in here. It just made it a lot more difficult because now, we were always an island unto ourselves, but now we were like a, damn deserted island. Yeah. Nobody was coming in and out.
And hope.
But it never affected Dad's business relationship with Jimmy Crockett, and it never affected Dad's relationship with Fritz. It was just Fritz thought he could live without the NWA, and within, as smart as he was, within 2 years, and I can see how the family was upset with not giving Kerry the belt again. I agree he should have got it again, but it ended up happening the way it happened.